Hi, and welcome to Anne's Family Recipe. Today I'm making Southern style sweet tea and drop biscuits. As many of you know who follow along with my channel, my family recently took a trip to Tennessee, and I became obsessed with sweet tea and biscuits. Today, I'm gonna make my own sweet tea. Now, my son Jack, he's 7, and he loves fruity teas, so I thought today I would use a mixture of half black tea and half peach tea, because that is his favorite flavor. And I think it would be really perfect for summertime too. So in front of me I have, it really doesn't matter how much water you start out with, you just want a few cups. I think I have about 3 cups in this Pyrex measuring cup. And I'm actually just gonna boil my water in the microwave. So I'm gonna get this going for a few minutes until, it comes to a boil. You'll see the little bubbles coming up to the surface, and then we'll pop in our tea bags and let it steep. My water has come to a boil, so now I'm gonna steep 2 black tea bags and 2 of my peach tea bags. So if you don't want to do the peach flavor, you could just do 4 black tea bags. And mine are all decaf. The peach is like an herbal tea, and then I'm using decaf black tea just because that's my preference. For me, it doesn't, caffeine makes me a little bit crazy, and it's better for my kids too, because we're serving this with dinner tonight, so I don't want them to have too much caffeine. There'll be enough sugar in the tea to amp them up a little bit as is. So we're gonna let this steep for about 10 to 15 minutes. We want it to get nice and dark. I wanted to mention too that the reason why it doesn't really matter how much water you steep them in, just like 2 or 3 cups, is because we're gonna pour this into a large pitcher and then we'll just fill it all the way up with water. We're gonna use a gallon pitcher, so you don't really have to measure this water super precisely to begin with. It'll be a gallon when it's all said and done. So my tea has steeped, and now I'm going to pour it into my pitcher. So I'm starting with 1 cup of sugar, and I'm gonna pour that into the bottom. And I'm using granulated sugar because I'm adding hot liquid to it, so that will help dissolve the sugar and disperse the sweetness evenly through our tea. You could also make a simple syrup, which is quite easy to do. If you're using, it's like equal parts water and sugar. So since I'm using 1 cup of sugar, you would just mix that with 1 cup of water in a little saucepan on the stove and bring it to a simmer until the sugar dissolves. And that way, if you're worried about putting something hot into whatever vessel you're using to hold your tea, you could allow the simple syrup to cool as well as your steeped tea, and then add everything when it's cool into your pitcher, whatever works for you. I'm gonna pour my tea mixture over top. I wanna give it a smell. It smells nice and peachy, so I'm really excited to try this. So we'll pour this over top. Okay, then I'm gonna stir this up so that the sugar dissolves. And then I'm just gonna step over to my sink and fill this to the top with cold water. Then I'll pop the lid on and put it in the fridge for several hours so it cools down and we're ready for dinner. So I'll just give this a quick stir and then pop it in the fridge. My peach sweet tea has been chilling all afternoon, so I'm just gonna give it one more little stir just to make sure everything is evenly distributed. Looks so pretty. I love the color of tea. Okay, so now I'll pop the lid back on, and I just have a nice tall glass here. I put some ice in the bottom and then a couple of fresh peach slices. I thought that would look pretty. Little garnish. It already smells really peachy. I love that. Okay, so now I'm gonna try it out. That is super refreshing. It almost tastes like a peach snow cone. It's really good. I think my kids are gonna absolutely love this. Whew, that's tasty. Okay, I'm going back for more. So I fell in love with all different forms of biscuits on our recent trip to Nashville, Tennessee. Basically, after I unpacked, I immediately got online and started looking for biscuit recipes, and I wanted to make them stat. The first recipe I looked for was for Drop Biscuits, which uses baking powder as the leavening agent, so they rise really quickly. They don't use any yeast. They're super fast to make, and this recipe that I found was absolutely amazing. So it has a little bit of sugar, there's a hint of sweetness in the background, and it cooks at a super high temperature. So they're done in like minutes. It's awesome. All we have to do is combine our dry ingredients together and then add in the wet. So in this large mixing bowl, I have 2 cups of flour, and I'm gonna add an additional 2 cups of flour because I'm doubling the original recipe. Now, I just wanted to show you, I'm using my mother-in-law's 2-cup measuring cup, which I love. I think it's so cool. So you probably don't agree. I'm probably such a kitchen nerd, but I love it. So I'm gonna add in the other 2 cups of flour, and then I just have a little whisk here, so I'll whisk it around just to get some of the lumps out. Andrew's ready for some biscuits. I can hear him in the background. Okay, so to the flour, I'm going to add my baking powder. So I have 2 tablespoons of baking powder. And then the original recipe, which by the way is from a food blog called findingzest.com, just to give them credit, it calls for 1 batch, either anywhere between 1 to 3 tablespoons of sugar, depending on how sweet you want them. So when I first made these, I only added 1 tablespoon of sugar, and I thought it was perfect. It makes them really unique because they have this subtle sweetness in the background. They also have a ton of butter in them, so with the butter and the sugar, it's just this perfect balance. I was actually eating them plain. Usually I would put butter and jam on my biscuits, but these were so good I didn't even need that, but I still want it, so I think I'm gonna add some of that later tonight when I eat them. But in this dish I have 2 tablespoons of sugar because we're doubling the recipe, as I said before, so we'll sprinkle that in. Oh, and also in here, kind of blended in, but I added a half a teaspoon of salt. So we'll whisk all the dry ingredients together. So next I'm gonna drizzle in 2 cups of whole milk along with 2 sticks of melted unsalted butter. You excited, Andrew? He's standing now, so he's standing at the gate into the kitchen hanging on. So I'm just gonna whisk this all together until it's just incorporated, and then I have my oven already preheated to 450 degrees. It's important that you get that going right away because the baking powder, once it's activated, this dough is gonna start to rise, so you wanna bake them right away. They're gonna taste best that way. So I'm trying not to make too much of a mess here. I always like to test the limits of my mixing bowls here. So one tip I want to say is that you might want to switch over to a wooden spoon or a rubber spatula once you're ready to incorporate the wet into the dry, just because it kind of gets stuck inside the whisk here, but we'll make it work. So I have 2 cookie sheets here lined with silicone baking mats, which is going to make this a nice non-stick surface for our biscuits. And I just have a soup spoon here, like an approximate tablespoon measure. So I'm going to do kind of heaping tablespoons. And the nice thing about these biscuits is that you can bake them fairly close together on the cookie sheet. Because they don't really spread that much. They'll puff up a little bit, but they won't spread out. So I'm just gonna scoop the biscuit mixture onto my cookie sheets, and then we'll bake them off at 450 degrees, probably for about 10 to 12 minutes or so until they are golden brown around the edges. Since I doubled my recipe and used both racks in my oven, after 5 minutes of baking, I swapped the trays of biscuits just so they would brown evenly on the top and the bottom. So my biscuits took exactly 11 minutes to cook perfectly through. You can see they're nice and fluffy. The kitchen smells awesome. And now I'm gonna give them a taste. I have never had a drop biscuit recipe with sugar in it, and that makes all the difference. It just gives it that slightly sweet, just unique flavor. I love it. Super light and fluffy. And they're called a drop biscuit because you literally are just dropping the dough onto your baking tray. You don't have to use a biscuit cutter or any formal gear to cut out your biscuits. They're so easy to put together, super fast to bake, and they have all these nice crispy edges too from being a drop biscuit. These are awesome. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and follow me on Instagram at Ann's Family Recipe. Thank you so much for joining me today in my kitchen, and I'll see you again soon with another family recipe. For the full recipe, check the description box below, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Thanks for joining me in my kitchen.